Perth is a great city. It's peaceful, and it's clean, and it's pleasant. It's a nice place to spend a little bit of time, whether it's for work or for leisure. However, when you're staying in Perth, you have to stay somewhere. So in this video, I'm going to talk about South Perth specifically, including the Quest in South Perth, and I'll go through whether South Perth is worth considering as a place to stay. So what is it? Well, South Perth is a relatively modern part of Perth. The area I'm particularly referring to just sits on the Swan River. It's just opposite Perth CBD. It's one ferry stop away. That ferry is about 10 to 15 minutes to get into the Perth CBD if you're really stretching it out. It's relatively quick. Now, South Perth itself is relatively quiet. On the foreshore, you've got some low-rise apartment blocks, which are reportedly relatively pricey. It also has some restaurants and an overpriced IGA and some walking paths. It's not exactly a bar or a club area, but it has enough there to keep you occupied while you're trying to find somewhere to eat. In particular, there are places like Quest South Perth, which sit adjacent to a large park with miniature beaches and the like that are worth considering as a place to stay. Now, the real estate, like I said, is relatively pricey, and it's easy to see why. After all, it is just on the Swan River, so it has water views, so to speak. Now, they're not exactly ocean views, but given that they're looking onto the Swan River and then onto buildings, they're potentially a little bit more interesting than some ocean views you might see. But in any case, it's a nice area. Now, like I said, it's probably going to be about 10 minutes to Perth CBD by ferry, but you can also drive across a bridge which will go over the Swan River to get into the CBD. Most people are probably just going to go via ferry because that will be quicker and probably cheaper altogether. That's probably the easiest and most scenic way to get into the city. After all, if you are a tourist in a location, the ferry is often the cheapest, best way to actually see the location and get some touristy photos. Now, South Perth is also a rather cheaper place to stay than Perth CBD. That's usually the case for most cities. Staying in the CBD is probably the most expensive place to stay, even if it isn't necessarily the best place to stay, especially when places just outside are often quite quick to get there. So it is a little bit cheaper. So if you want to save some money, then South Perth might in fact be a reasonable option. It's also more spacious, it's quite pleasant, and it is cheaper. So unless you really need to save that 10-minute ferry ride, South Perth could be an option. Now, if you're just wandering around South Perth, like I've indicated, it has a rather nice foreshore with some statues of random animals floating around. It also has some miniature beaches. It has a large park that you can walk through. It has a large walking path along the foreshore. So there's a lot you can do there to just keep you occupied in a relaxed manner. So of course this then begs the question of where would you stay in South Perth? Well, I recently stayed at the Quest in South Perth for business. These were serviced apartments and they were relatively large. The apartment I stayed in was spacious. The bathroom was clean and modern, if rather generic. It had a washing machine and a dryer, so you could do your laundry in there as well, without having to go through hotel laundry, churning through a ton of money. Now, the apartment itself has an adequate kitchen. It's not exactly a massive kitchen, but it's certainly large enough to do reasonable cooking. It's an ordinary apartment-sized kitchen, with what you would need to be able to survive for a short period of time. Otherwise, the apartment is rather large. It has a large living room, a large dining room, which again are spacious, they're modern enough, if relatively generic. There are 2 reasonable sized bedrooms that have ample storage. The apartment overall is pleasant, it does the job, it's modern. It resembles a new-ish apartment. It reminds me of new apartments that I see all the time. Now, it isn't necessarily stylish or ornate or unique, or have all of these various other accoutrements that some hotels try to have. But many of those other hotels oftentimes end up being more money for less space. So it is of course going to be a trade-off. I'd personally prefer to stay in the Quest with perhaps larger space, a modern apartment, than get all of the other random things I probably don't actually care about with some other hotels. Now, the Quest South Perth doesn't really have any other amenities, so if things like pools or whatever are important to you, then this Quest South Perth might not be for you. However, if again you want to save some money by skipping those amenities, you might want to consider it. Now, there are some shops just below the Quest South Perth, which includes an overpriced IGA. However, I suspect most people won't be doing much shopping. The IGA is nice to have because it's convenient, but it is expensive, so I'm not sure you'd actually want to do very much shopping there. I'd probably stock up at Coles when I went into the CBD myself. So that's an overview of where you might stay in Perth. I liked South Perth. I would definitely consider returning to South Perth. There aren't that many hotel options in that area, so the Quest South Perth is probably where I'd ultimately end up staying. But if you've got any thoughts about where to stay in Perth, which locations to stay in, which hotels to stay in, let me know that in the comments below. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, and hopefully I see you next time as well.